Hello.
Hi, and welcome to the fifth episode of our podcast series.
Yeah, this is gonna be fun and interesting. I like how it's progressing. I like how I say that every time also.
By the looks on Zara's face, which you can't tell, but I can, I feel like she has something really
Yeah.
not so great.
Okay,
fired
this
out.
is based on an idea. I was listening again. I listen to a lot of podcasts and I read a lot about these philosophical things. And there was this idea that was brought up, and I kind of want to not recreate that entire flow, but I had my own opinions and my own process to parts of it, and I kind of want to lead that conversation in a way where I can make that point by example. Okay, and it's like a discussion. And
So
the
am
question,
I like your guinea pig?
no, you're my person in conversation,
Okay.
and it's
Okay.
it's an interesting conversation because I haven't normally we kind of like come up with an idea to talk about or we go through the process, but in this I haven't given the main point to Fatma here, but I've told her the question, and the question is, who are you, right? And the question is for everyone, like, who the hell am I? Like, am I Zara? Am I a daughter? Am I like a 20-year-old girl? Am I an artist? Am I a photographer? Who the hell am I? And I want you to kind of answer that any way you like. And how would you answer that?
Who am I?
Yeah.
I think if you strip away all that I've done and all that I've learned, I think at the very core of it, I'm a person who loves learning.
Okay.
I have a passion for knowledge.
Okay.
As weird as that sounds, I'm a person who is very empathic and very compassionate. I think to a point where my learning, a lot of it, has been how to create boundaries around my compassion and my empathy
Okay. Question. How do you know that?
because of my lived experiences.
Okay.
And that starts from, I think, a very young age.
Yeah.
And so I think compassion and I think empathy starts from, I think, me being a kid, right, and not realizing that I really can't do much. And I've always been very protective, I think, of friends and parents and all of that. And then growing up, obviously, and I think the kind of friends and I think the kind of relationships I've had in my life have always pointed towards high empathy, high compassion at all times for me.
I have another question. When I asked you this question before, you were like, "Ah," is it daunting
Yeah.
to summarize your entire existence in one sentence?
It really is. Also because I think, also because of the things I've learned, at one point I question myself like, अच्छा, like, but मैं हूँ कौन के इतना कुछ कह रही हूँ, right?
Yeah.
Like, who am I to say all these things? Like, who am I
Yeah.
to actively say that I've learned all of these things in my life, and I'm at a place where I know what I want, and I know who I am, and I know what I can do. Because I'm 21, and the general, I think, time frame or description for 21-year-old is not this. The general level of awareness or whatever is supposed to be, or that has been narrated, is not this.
So there's points to this, right? And the reason I want to like break it down is because this is when I have asked people, who are you? Or when I have been asked to summarize my entire existence, my initial thought is role, and then it's beyond role to personality, and then it's beyond personality to belief.
So the reason I say compassion, empathy, and love of knowledge, so is because I recently did this when I was taking my coach training classes, right? So they said that strip yourself down, not
Exactly.
away from your qualifications, away from the roles you play. Who are you as a person? As Zara, who are you? As Fatima, who
Exactly.
am I?
Yeah.
Right? And so I think very true and a very honest culmination of all my being stems down to compassion.
Yeah.
And a lot of it stems down to empathy. And a lot of it is also because of...
Okay. So the thing is, I'm sorry to cut you off, but it's like
Okay.
it's a circular thing, right? So our being or our entire being can be broken down to a very inner core. Okay?
Yeah.
And the core is normally spiritual. Spiritual, not religious. Spiritual as in part of faith, part of belief, part of a core phenomena that wants freedom and knowledge and seeking, but you only reach there with self-awareness.
Yeah.
Your outer cores are all physical, emotional, vocational, and all of those things that make you who you are. And the reason I say this is because one of the exercises one of my teachers did with me, and this was a photography class, and he was like, okay, I get up and speak about yourself and only yourself for over a minute. No one in that class could, right? And if you do speak about yourself, right, you will always hint to other people, right? Like even with you, even if you say compassion, the only way you know you're compassionate is because you can act out of that.
Okay, so there's a really interesting reason for why this happens.
Yeah.
Right? And it's not because we don't know who we are. It's okay. So it's genuinely because the only way your existence is validated is through other people.
Exactly.
And this is okay. And this is a really interesting concept. Okay, it's by Hegel. He is one
We've touched on this before.
We have, and this is going to be.
I want to go in depth with it. Yeah.
So Hegel, I think when I first read about his theory in university, in my political theory class, I think I was like blown away because his theory made so much sense to me, and it wasn't. It was something really complicated, but I think the way I was taught was simplified it a lot. And what Hegel talks about is the world spirit, right? There's a spirit of the world, just like yourself, much like any idea that ever exists, and it's all circular. There's a thesis, there's an antithesis, and then there's a synthesis. And this whole process of understanding, negation, and then validation again is stemming from the same thing. It's like how we say.
Okay, let's simplify the words that you just said.
Okay.
There's master, there's slave,
and then there's a culmination of both.
Yeah.
So the master-slave dialect, I think, is a very real historical example to explain how Hegel's theory works. And a really good example of this is the Haitian Revolution that happened. So Haiti was the first place where a slave uprising had happened, and during this time is when Hegel wrote about his theory. It was published in Minerva, which was a really, really famous.
I love the facts.
Yeah, it was a really famous newspaper at the time. It still is. There's a really famous quote about it also, that the wings of Minerva spread from dawn till dusk or something like that. I don't remember exactly, but it was really famous.
Yeah.
And so Hegel's theory about master-slave dialect, right? It starts from the fact that there are two beings walking in a forest, and as individuals, let's say you're in a forest and you can use trees. So you can use apples of the tree, you can use the leaves, the trunk, whatever. And at one point you come across a tree that you can't really use. And because you can't use the tree, you go into conflict. Because now that is no longer an object, it is another being. And because there is another being, you now feel like you've lost a part of your own self. Because the other being also recognizes you. So it's stolen a part of your own identity and kept it with itself.
That's a little complicated.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a really simple, I think, and a really very everyday example of this is how there are images of you and memories of you that exist with other people.
Yeah.
Right? So you exist for other people apart from how you exist for yourself.
Okay, so in other words, it's like, again, the reality and the perception. Okay? I'll break it down. Okay, so like there's an ultimate truth. Okay, and the truth that is true for me might not be true for you, because my truth is based on my perception of reality, and reality doesn't necessarily
have to be the same for everyone,
and reality doesn't have to be real.
Exactly,
because reality is only defined by our experiences. So if I don't experience something,
you will
like
not
if I didn't experience that tree, I would be completely unaware of it. It doesn't exist. It's not real.
Exactly, and that's
not true.
So the only way, essentially, you know you exist, right? The only way that other person knows it exists is because now there is another being that he cannot use for his own sake, and that validates him. And because of that, this crisis is formed, right? Where a war breaks out. Because that one being wants to reclaim his own self, right? And so he wants to kill the other person.
Okay, so the way you told me this before was like the master, right? He has all the power in the sense that the slave does anything for the master. I'm talking about the
so,
philosophical.
So that is so when this war happens, right? Ye war ke baad, there's a master and a slave that comes out of it.
Yeah.
Right? The master holds power over the slave because it was willing to give up its life.
Yeah.
Right? And this is again is it's really interesting how this links up is how consciousness can only exist if it has a physical form, and we all like to believe that we are better and greater and know a lot more and be a lot more than those
Okay.
around us.
I like that you brought this point, because this is essentially where I was going to lead it, right? It's also like we have a sense of identity and we want other people to perceive us that way. And if they don't perceive us that way,
It irritates.
we don't have any control over it.
We don't.
Right? And for example, like I struggle by saying, oh, I'm an artist or I'm a photographer, because even though I don't like to be defined by just those words, and I don't see other people defining me by that, you know. So it's a both matter. It's how I see myself and how you see me defines me.
And so if you could, you can also call it a war in a way.
Yeah.
Right? And which is essentially where
I'm both of
exactly
those things. Yeah.
But okay, again, there's an interesting continuation for this, right? So I'll summarize up Hegel in short words. What really comes to happen is that the slave realizes he has agency of his own self. Interestingly, Hegel does not continue with this, and possibly because of just the historical conditions of the time, he couldn't. But what happens in Haiti is that there's an actual revolution where slaves rise up against masters. And Haiti was really important because it was a very multicultural place with French and
I would call that like seeking awareness. Once you have awareness, you have power.
And the thing is, it's like what you said, once you have awareness, you cannot go back.
You can't.
So once these people realize they have agency, they cannot stop unless they have a revolution.
Yeah. Okay. That's one way, right? The point of that, connecting to who we are, was I am me because you can perceive me and experience me. Right?
Yeah.
Essentially. The other thing, I don't know if you were the one who told me, is how we develop a sense of self. Is the baby. Did you? Yeah. So you said that a child, when they want to check out their boundaries, they will lift their hands and their legs up, right, to be able to grasp that this is me. So it's a process of negation, right? I am not the hand that's touching me. I am not the chair I'm on. I'm not the
whatever. Yeah, you are everything that you are not.
That you're not.
So it's also like how growing up, right? We don't know who we are until we have lived experiences to tell us who we actually are.
Yeah.
So I know that I don't really fancy biology or whatever is because I have an experience of biology.
Exactly.
Right? So like I've studied it in the 6th grade and I was like, fuck this is not what I want to do. That's the only reason I know I don't want to do it.
Exactly. Like so first, I am existing because you can experience me, right? Second, I am existing because I am not you.
Yes.
So it's both. That's my theory. The third is the thing that you pointed out. It's that role playing, right? It's that thing that, okay, the label that we put. It's kind of like that. So it's like, so the podcast I was listening to, it was a very interesting podcast, because if I come to you, like you labeled yourself as life coach, right? And I come to you, okay, Fatma, do you have an advice for me, right? I'm coming from that expectation and putting you in that role because of my perception of you, and I expect you to fulfill my expectation of you.
Yeah.
Right? So it goes with both of those things that we discovered before. But the whole process of self-awareness and growth, as this person said, was that at a certain point, you don't want to be just that. You don't want to be just how other people experience you. And it links with the idea of utter stillness, right? I don't need to have all the answers to be me. I can exist in harmony with everything and nothing.
So you know what this reminds me of is that everything exists simultaneously.
Yeah.
There's noise and then there's quiet. There's knowing, there's unknowing. There's being and then there's not being. And then there's knowledge and then there is the absence of knowledge.
Yeah.
You can be still and also be really loud.
Yeah.
All things exist together.
It's simultaneously.
And so when I was doing the course, when I was doing the life coaching course, right, there was this really interesting concept that we came across. It was the distinction between knowledge and knowing.
Yeah.
Okay? Knowledge is learned. Knowledge is logic. Right? But knowing is internal. Knowing is your gut feeling. It is not things that you have perceived. It is not things that
it's
you have...
intuition.
It is entirely intuition, right?
Yeah.
And I think this whole process of who you are, who am I, who is anyone, is a process of really letting intuition take the front seat in the car, right? It is to let intuition take the driver's seat, and logic to take a seat behind. which sounds really odd. Even to me, it sounds really odd because I think as a person, I like that a logical formation of things, right?
See, intuition. Okay, I have a very nice connection with intuition because I am extremely, extremely intuitive and in tuned, or at least that's how I think of myself. Right?
No, but that's how you are, because that is exactly how you think of yourself.
Exactly my point. Yeah. So, okay, with intuition, the thing is, you just have to believe that it is there. Okay, it's about listening, but not. It's like listening without voices and seeing without eyes. It is feeling and sensing without senses, without definition, and you just know.
You know, it's like this. I think for something like intuition, I think everyone has it, because it is a knowing. Everyone has it.
It's about connecting to it.
It's only how much you allow it to be heard.
I don't think it's about allowing. I think it's like about connecting. Because
but that is allowing it, isn't it?
Yeah. But the thing that I think is with intuition, a lot of times people have so much noise of their own, and they, you don't want to feel, right?
The only way you can have intuition is, everyone has intuition. The only way you can really process the world and yourself through intuition is if you dim the voice in your own mind.
You have to strip yourself down of logic, like you said, right? And you have to strip yourself down of judgment that comes with it. And then only you listen to intuition, because a lot of situations I've been in, intuition says don't do it.
And logic will say do.
Yeah. And it's not the same thing as listening from your heart. It is deeper.
No. So again, in this course, right, we did this thing called logical levels of hearing.
Yeah.
And there are 4 essential ones. But the progress is that most of us do downloading factual, right? Then there's a heart space hearing that we do. That is empathy, right? But even deeper, a deeper level of learning, of listening, is a gut level, which is entirely intuition based, which is not empathy, not factual.
How do you develop it?
You need stillness and you need silence.
How do you develop that?
How do you develop stillness and silence? You learn to be okay with silence in the first place.
How do you do that?
You learn to be okay with yourself. You learn forgiveness. You learn forgiveness, and you learn acceptance.
How do you do that?
By diving deeper into your own self.
How do you do that?
Review of your entire life and your entire action base.
How?
It requires.
I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah.
But that's the whole progression, because a lot of times when we talk about these things with people, they don't know how. Every time the question is how and why, right? So the ideas only work if you question why.
But the thing is, you already know how and why. Everyone knows how and why.
Yeah.
It's just that it might not be in clear words, but everyone knows how and why.
And the resistance is because it's daunting.
Yeah.
It's not an easy process to be like, okay, I'm going to go and find inner peace and I'll be enlightened.
No, it's really painful.
It is, and you know what? It's the art of suffering.
Yeah.
All of Buddha talks about it. This a podcast I was listening to was about like the emptiness and compassion and the pain and suffering that causes compassion to exist.
Because you know what it is. You know what it is. Emptiness, stillness, silence is absolute lack of judgment.
Yeah.
It is an entire lack of judgment.
I believe that the judgment will again only come when you've bypassed all of this. And to bypass all of this, you have to look at yourself non-judgmentally through the other person.
But that's the thing. That's really difficult. I think what people perceive to be difficult is forgiving other people. What I think is the most difficult thing to do is, at least, especially for my own self, is forgiveness of self.
Yeah, I've never found it hard to
forgive others. No, it's not. I think it is definitely one of the easiest things for me to do, because it's really easy to understand where a person comes from, right?
Okay, also I want to point out, forgiveness of other person does not mean that you're saying what they did is right.
No, it's just
it's just that you're not in control of their actions.
And also, the very simple understanding again is that everyone has a positive intention behind any action they do, and even if that hurts you. Right?
Okay, and even if they don't have a positive intent, and even if they're a bad human being, your forgiveness is your action.
Exactly.
And not theirs.
Exactly. And you know what? So it takes a lot, I think, at a first glance to accept these things, that everyone has a positive intention or even any intention, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that everyone always makes the best choice and the best outcome that is available to them, right? No one wants bad or worse or whatever, right? Whatever feels best to them, even if
Such
that
a
is,
humanistic psychology.
and
Yeah.
even if that is a really self-destructive decision, it is what feels best to them. So no one does anything that is essentially goes against a few basic principles of our own self-gratification, right?
Unless they're a sociopath.
But that's it. We're not talking about sociopaths,
Yeah,
right?
I want to point that out because everything in the right context makes sense. If you
Yeah.
pulled any of the things that we say,
You can't apply this to like Hitler or Stalin or like a sociopath or a psychopath. This is not for
day to day general human life.
Yeah, and once you realize these things, once you realize that there are multiple sides to every action and also to every non-action, it becomes a lot easier. Actually, it just becomes really, really simple. It becomes without effort to forgive people.
I agree. I went on a very different thought right now.
Which is
No.
say it.
My thought is again like who you are is because I want to bring it back to the start, like a circular thing, right? It's a whole process, right? So it is process over process over process, simplification of those process, right? So who you are is merely the observer of your processes.
You are an observer of your life.
So your life is a basic sense of processes.
Yeah.
So forgiveness would be the process and you're just the observer of that. So and to do that, the whole idea of stillness and spaciousness and mindfulness goes together, which is why mindfulness is so good. But there's a very specific mindfulness that talks about all of this, and that mindfulness is called transcendental meditation.
Yeah.
That meditation essentially says that anything, like the most calm place on the whole planet, on the whole world, or the whole universe you can think of is within you, and it is a matter of you tapping it, touching it, holding
true.
it, and it's in you. And there's a certain way of doing it. It's very different than normal meditations. It's a mantra based meditation. It works on frequencies and vibrations, but it is a very interesting thought.
But it makes absolute sense because we function on frequencies and vibrations too.
Yeah.
That's exactly how we attract people or are attracted or not attracted to certain people. That's why certain people you will get along with and certain people you will not get along with. And I think a general takeaway from all of this, right, it's again a circular process. Who you are is essentially just for your own self. How people perceive you, how you are perceived or not perceived, is entirely the other person's opinion. And that's entirely for them. It's not for you.
And there's a very big distinguishing factor of that, right? Because the way I would say people perceive them is based on other people's perception, right?
So it's a ripple effect.
Yeah, like for example, I hear people say this is why I want to point it out, is because if I do this act, I'll be good for them. But are you good for you? You can do actions that are defining you because you're doing actions for someone else, for their perception to be good.
A general line, I think a general rule that I follow always, right, is you have to have very clear intent behind whatever you do.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't do good, right, just because it'll be good for the other person or because they think it's good. It's like do good for the sake of good, right? Which is again like we'll talk about Socrates some other day if we ever have time, which is essentially that justice and just causes and good, they're all for the sake of it itself. You do it not because of any external value, but because it is good in and of itself. That's why you as a being are whoever you want yourself to be in and of itself. Yeah. And I think that
I think that brings it to the end.
Yeah.
And the end question is the exact first question.
Who are you?
What defines you? What are the boundaries that define you? What are the non-parameters that define
but not your qualification, not your education.
No, if people want to define themselves by that, it's fine.
But I think strip yourself out of that. Strip yourself to the
That's
very
the process.
core.
Start by that.
Layer it down.
Layer it down.
Okay, yeah. So who are you?
Because if someone asks me who the hell am I and I go directly to the core, it's a difficult process. So I think step by step, it softens the blow.
Alright, okay. Okay, we'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.